Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's webcast entitled The Content Marketing Crossroads and Rise of Content Intelligence. Today's conversation is brought to you by Saralytics and powered by Onstream Media. To submit a question or a comment at any time during the webinar, please click on the Ask a Question button on the bottom of your screen. Simply type your message into the box and click on the Submit button. Alternatively, you can submit your question via Twitter using the hashtag ContentMetrics. All questions will be answered at the end of today's presentation. At this time, it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to today's host, Rebecca Lieb, research analyst and author. Rebecca, the floor is now yours.
Thank you so much, and hello, everybody. Thank you for agreeing to spend your lunch hour, if you're here on the East Coast with us, or part of your morning, learning more about content marketing intelligence and content metrics. I'm going to kick off this morning or this afternoon by presenting research I've done on the topic, and then I'm going to hand the controls over to my colleague Brandon Andersen from Saralytics, who's going to talk more about Saralytics content intelligence methodology. And as was said at the top of the webinar, please feel free to submit questions at any time. Brandon and I are going to reserve time to address your questions and your queries after the webinar. And if we don't get back to you or we don't have time to get back to you on the webinar, I think both of us are equally happy to address you one-on-one via email. So please do keep those cards and letters and tweets and questions coming. So content marketing intelligence. I conducted research as an analyst on the content marketing tool landscape, and when I conducted survey data, 67% of marketers said measurement is the top area in which they need to invest this year. They need tools and they need help in measuring the efficacy of their content marketing. But what their needs are versus what their wants are aren't really aligning. So that 67% was tied with audience and targeting. Those are the two needs that marketers say that they have when it comes to measuring content. But when I asked marketers, what are you really going to invest in, as opposed to what do you need to invest in, the overwhelming majority of them are investing in stuff that gives them more content creation at 34%, content creation and aggregation at 38%. So that you can see, while there's this very, very clear stated need that marketers need to know more about if their content's working, they're distracted. They're too busy trying to get more content out there than they are with figuring out what works, what's effective, what's resonating with their audience, and most importantly of all, what's meeting their business goals. And this isn't surprising because it's hard to measure content's impact. First, there are market challenges. Content analytics are still nascent on the marketing side. Of course, publisher metrics have been with us for many years, but marketers aren't publishers. They've got different goals than just traffic or selling advertising. And because digital content marketing is an emerging discipline, standards are non-existent. There is a huge proliferation of vendors in the landscape. I've looked at a content marketing landscape of over 200 vendors, and there's only one thing I can say with certainty that all the tools around content marketing have in common, and that's having a dashboard. So all of these dashboards measure different things, and they basically provide multi-versions of a truth rather than a single truth when you look at so many different numbers and different data sets. And then there are operational challenges. The majority of organizations still don't have a content strategy that's documented. And a content strategy is not just how you're going to get your content marketing done. It also outlines what your strategic goals are for content marketing. And without outlining strategic goals, you really can't make a plan for measuring those goals if you don't know what they are. And finally, content tends to have a low visibility within the enterprise. While there are different marketing disciplines dedicated for social media marketing, for email, for search, for all of these discrete disciplines, content in most organizations tends to live on its own. It's picked up as a side duty. It's not really a dedicated department yet, organizationally speaking. I am trying to push to slide 5, and it is not happening on my end. Brandon, do you think you can get that next slide to load? I might need to ask you to move the slide for me.
You got it. I just switched.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm afraid I'm going to take just an additional second to open up my deck here because I'm going to have to follow along manually at home. So excuse me for the bumpiness here. It wouldn't be fun if we didn't have technical glitches, would it?
Exactly. Well, while you're loading that up, I'll just throw some color in here as well. I know from working with many clients, in my experience, this is 100% true, where there are so many different things that you can actually measure. There are so many things that, you have everything has a dashboard. It's, well, what should I be measuring? How should I be measuring it? And that is by and far the biggest issue that I have run across. And Rebecca, you're absolutely right. People say it's their biggest problem, but they just don't know what to invest in. They don't know if it's worth investing in because they're looking at metrics that maybe are pushed by putting investment in not metrics, but in production.
Very, very valid point. So I am just getting this deck here. Thanks for bearing with me. I don't think this has ever actually happened to me on a webinar, but it's always got to be a first time.
We wanted to make sure we threw curveballs at you.
That was a good curveball. Okay. So 43% of marketers say they have unmet needs in measuring content ROI. But what they're distracted with is this need to, what we like to call feed the beast. It's an old newsroom term for you've got to make more content, you've got to make that next story, you've got to fill up tomorrow's issue with content or tomorrow's blog post or tomorrow's Facebook page. So this is this organizational imperative that's an ongoing requirement. So on to slide 6, please. This puts us at a content marketing crossroads. On the one hand, organizations are publishing at very high volume. I spoke to Linda Boff, who's the CMO at General Electric, who pointed out very astutely and very overwhelmingly that GE now publishes more content every day than Time Magazine did on a weekly basis during its heyday. They've got broad audiences, not just GE, but many other organizations. This content is focused at building awareness, and it's very, very research-driven in terms of that high volume. But content intelligence is what enables you to publish high-value content targeted to the right audiences. And, of course, audience targeting was tied for content metrics as the number one stated need. This intelligent content and having content intelligence is convergence-focused and it's data-driven. So going on to the next slide, this is what we're going to be talking about today. First, the framework that I developed with my co-researcher Susan Ettlinger for measuring content marketing performance. We're going to look at use cases of brands doing this well as what specifically they measured. And then Brandon is going to pick up the ball and talk about utilizing content intelligence to craft a measurement strategy. So let's jump 2 slides ahead to a framework for measuring content performance. Now, this is the business value of content strategy that we developed that goes beyond sales. Sales are wonderful. I'm the first to admit it. Sales are the lifeblood of any organization. But I think that brands are limiting themselves by not measuring the impact of content beyond sales. And by impact, I don't mean vanity metrics like likes and shares. I mean content metrics that you can take to the CFO and say, we developed and extracted value from our content marketing program by helping us generate revenue in a new way, helping us operate more efficiently, improving customer experience, etc. And, of course, these metrics are just going on to the next point, are raw ingredients. They're building blocks. Every single organization is going to have its own unique ingredients, which means tools and sources of data. But I hope that this will serve inspirational to you in terms of ways that you can measure your content differently. So let's jump to the next slide, content measurement case studies. And the next slide, number 1, is brand health. And brand health is a measure of attitudes, conversation, and behavior towards your brand that is hopefully going to increase things like brand perception, brand awareness, brand favorability. All of these things fall into that bucket. So the content and the response to the content that signals how communications augment or detract from the health of your brand is part of that signal. You measure interest and you measure behavior. Going on to the next slide, the Seattle Seahawks is one example of a brand that's measuring like this. Seattle Seahawks has a goal of using the digital channels not just to become an extension of what they're doing in terms of broadcasting games, but to extend the relationship and to deepen the relationship between the Seahawks fans and the team. And this, of course, enables not just more ticket sales, but sales of things like merchandise and related items that relate to the brand. So their social media team, going to the next slide, assesses their content performance to determine what resonates with fans, both in terms of a broad community and also fans as individuals. It might be something like Snoop Dogg visiting the team on the playing field. It might be charitable actions when the Seahawks players visit sick children in a hospital. What engages, what resonates, what's shared, what's passed along, what spurs orders of merchandise and tickets. And by carefully measuring and optimizing, and we're going on to the next slide now, the Seahawks could see that their engagement and their audience across digital networks was growing significantly. They had a 40% increase in their overall audience, particularly on social channels, and a 173 increase in engagement. And they're using this data to not just inform what they're doing in digital channels, but to inform its entire communication strategy and to optimize all of their tactics going forward. So going on to the next slide, and I appreciate this is a little bit hard to read and a little bit text-heavy, but we're going to make this deck available to you after the presentation. I just wanted to dig in and get tactical and indicate to you how you can measure brand health, whether it's sentiment analysis, content performance, share of voice versus your competitors, or influencers who are following you, who are talking about you, and who are communicating about you favorably. Next slide is marketing optimization. And marketing optimization is an umbrella term that is applied to many different components of marketing strategy that indicate how you can improve your existing marketing efforts and also bump them up to the next level. So the next slide deals with a specialty toy retailer called Rokenbach. Some of you might be familiar with it. It is a very hands-on building toy. It's kind of like Lego, but with robotics shown in. And Rokenbach was having a problem to understand the product, what it can do, what you can build with it. These are hobbyists, these are children, these are older crafts enthusiasts. They were very, very reliant on merchandising in physical toy stores. But as physical toy stores are closing across the land and, we're being subsumed by retailers like Amazon, Rokenbach was at a bit of a loss as to how to merchandise its product and how to give people that hands-on demonstration. So the company decided to build a YouTube channel to help demonstrate its product and its capabilities. Going on to the next slide, they created their own YouTube videos that both entertained customers and prospects, but also demonstrated the products and their capabilities. And then customers piled on and started creating their own videos, showcasing what they had built using their own Rockenbach sets. Rockenbach was very, very involved in targeting these videos by keyword, by audience segment, by different types of targeting, people who were interested in building, structures versus people who were interested in building things with trucks, people more interested in the build versus the robotics. Going on to the next slide, this online video content strategy transformed Rockenbach's business from a brick-and-mortar-centric business to an e-commerce-centric business. 50% of Rockenbach's customers now come in not just digitally, but specifically from this YouTube channel. It is 50% of the traffic to the site. They've turned into effectively an e-tailer after becoming a retail product. Going on to the next slide, marketing optimization metrics really are all involved around cost savings, revenue, conversion, leads by content unit, leads by channel, leads by dollars spent, customer loyalty, sentiment, tweets, retweets, etc. Again, this is a detailed slide, but it will be made available to you. And going on to the next slide, we've also got revenue generation, which is content that helps drive prospects and customers through a sales funnel. Certainly, Rockenbach is somewhat applicable to that, but an example that I really love that breaks things down much more granularly, going on to the next slide, is a company by the name of Zenni Optical, an online glasses marketplace. They use search, off-site content, social media content to engage customers throughout the buying process. So, for example, during the order some frames and try them on at home and determine which glasses you're going to order, they encourage fans to take pictures of themselves, post those pictures on Instagram and say, hey, which glasses should I buy, A, B, or C? And this, of course, has the added PR halo effect of publicizing Zenni's services. They publish online tools that enable you to do things that an optometrist would do, like measure the bridge of your nose or the space between your pupils. They have educational material and emerging optical technology so you can understand whether you want that coating on your lens or not. Next slide, please. So their content experiences drive results across the entire customer journey, not just consideration and purchase, but also loyalty and innovation. They look for suggestions from their audiences to the next products they can develop or build for their customers, or improvements in their service. Going to the next slide, some of these revenue generation metrics might include popularity, how many times you praised and liked and shared, and also productivity, time to market of content-aided initiatives as opposed to those that are unaided. Going to the next slide, operational efficiency is a tremendously overlooked aspect of content intelligence. Because content strategy has to account for how you get content done, and that has to be done efficiently. So there's cost control, content repurposing, risk management, employee engagement, and things of that nature. A terrific case study in this regard is Unilever. Unilever has 173,000 employees. I don't know how many agencies across the world, 2 billion customers, 51 billion euros, which is roughly akin to dollars in sales in 2012. So in order to coordinate content and marketing efforts across the globe, all kinds of efficiencies are needed. So what Unilever did, and this goes on to the next slide, is invested in collaborative tools to scale their content globally across 30 brands, 40 agencies, and 20 different markets. And that enabled Unilever to reduce the time it took to create and publish content very, very, very significantly. Their savings was over $1 billion in the first year that they were massively sharing content that was approved on a global scale, so that all of this creation and all of these approvals didn't have to happen from territory to territory and country to country and language to language. So operational efficiency metrics, going to the next slide, really get down to productivity and cost savings and how much less duplication of effort you can do when you have the right processes and tools in place. On to the next example, customer experience, is content that demonstrates value not just by attracting leads or creating better buzz around your brand, but also customer support and service, which is a very, very significant cost center in most organizations. On to the next slide, a guy by the name of Nico Hendricks, who had Sony's communities in Europe, was talking to the head of Sony's call center in Holland, and he learned that the call center was getting a huge number of calls about a problem, a very easily fixed problem, but a problem nonetheless that consumers were having with a certain television model. And while the call center could very quickly resolve the customer issue, the problem that Sony was having is that every time somebody picks up the phone and calls Sony, it costs the company roughly $7, which is a lot of money. So Nico very quickly wrote up a post on how to resolve this problem, put it on Sony's community site, where it was viewed 42,000 times in the first 2 weeks that it was live. Now, this is really simple math that even I can do in my head practically. If Sony deflected, and it's fair to say that they deflected approximately 42,000 phone calls in 2 weeks, they can affix a value of 294,000 euros, which is roughly $300,000 to this single piece of content and say, look, this is how many calls we didn't get to the call center by putting up a piece of content that didn't even cost us money. Very, very clever approach, but most content marketers are not measuring their content in this way. But this is a number you can take straight to your boss or straight to the head of the company and say, fund us. Look what our content is doing. We just saved you $300,000 in 2 weeks. Other customer experience metrics, aside from things like call deflection, would be popularity and also nipping those potential issues or those red flags in the bud by proactively addressing them with content and creating this early warning system that might fend off bigger or more expensive problems at the pass. Next slide. The final case study I'd like to share with you is around innovation and how content can be an effective and efficient way to solicit ideas and engagement from your community members that contribute to all kinds of multiple organizational objectives and potentially get research and develop new products and get them on the market faster. And going to the next slide, that is something that Domino's Australia did. They wanted to better engage customers, and they also wanted to give those customers a chance to participate in the pizza making process. So they created a contest whereby customers could select ingredients. You know, the pizza universe is somewhat limited with cheese and tomato sauce and meats and things of that nature. So people would create these custom pizzas as well as name them. And not only could you order this pizza that you invented, you could also publish this pizza to the app, and other people could order that pizza as well. And not only were people encouraged to develop these pizzas, they were paid to develop the pizzas, because every time somebody ordered the pizza that you developed, you got a small commission from Domino's. So the creators had a stake in their own invention. They were really encouraged to invent pizzas that not only would appeal to them, but would appeal to a broad audience. So the result of this campaign was that Domino's quantified the most popular pizzas that users developed and the users who earned the most from their recipes, and they actually made the most popular pizzas a permanent part of the Domino's Australia menu. So rather than do all the R&D and test kitchening, Domino's was able to very quickly and very efficiently crowdsource pizzas with content and augment its menu accordingly. So some innovation metrics might include productivity, how quickly can we get a new idea to market, and does the content aid in the time and the development of that new product, and also popularity, the acceleration and reach of content over time and the popularity and sharing of that content. So going on to the next slide, I hope those 6 case studies were inspirational, but I'd like to get into some tangible next steps that you can adopt to craft a content measurement strategy on your own. So next slide is the most foundational one. Measurement is at the foundation of content strategy. Content strategy is determining what you want to achieve with your content, and number 2, how are you going to measure your progress towards that achievement? There is no content strategy without measurement. Next slide. Every measurement strategy has to focus on the business outcome. You'll notice that I did share examples with you that included things like how many likes did this get or how many tweets, these vanity volume metrics that marketers are so proud of earning. And there's nothing wrong with those metrics. It's just that those metrics have to be tied back to a tangible business outcome. If you're measuring brand favorability and you get more likes or tweets or shares, that's a valid metric. But likes, tweets, shares, and other volume metrics on their own aren't really valid measurements. Next slide, number 3, is know your metrics and your data. Know what you can measure. Know what you can't measure. Know what the data apply to. You know, there's some continuing ed involved in this. It doesn't just happen. You have to educate yourself. And you know that because that's why you're on this webinar today. Going on to the next slide, be realistic about your organizational capabilities and tools. There are some organizations that can afford, suites of quants all sitting at social listening consoles and using very sophisticated and deep web analytics packages and all kinds of data, and there are some organizations that are going to be limited to Google Analytics. You have to be realistic about what you're able to measure and what you can afford to measure, and you have to confine your ambitions to your means. Going on to the next slide, also you have to consider your content marketing integration needs. There is no software that is an island anymore in this very interconnected world we live in where marketing is connected to clouds that include advertising and social media and content and CRM and storage platforms and sharing platforms, search engines, data and analytics. So you have to look at how your analytics packages and your intelligence packages are going to integrate and inform with all of the other marketing tools that you use so that you don't have gaps and you don't have disconnects in your measurement. A lot of measurement ends up hitting the wall because integration hasn't been achieved. And with that, it's a lot of resources, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of personnel. I'm going to hand the ball over to Brandon now and talk about how you can get this done most effectively and efficiently.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. That was awesome. And I wish that was still going, and I wish I lived in Australia because I would create a pizza and I would name it after you. So thank you for
And I would have an opinion or two about my ingredients.
They would only be the best ingredients. That was really interesting, and that's really it's really interesting to see how content can really be something that drives so many different factors within an organization. And I think that is as content marketers, a lot of times we look at things, we say, and like here's, it's exactly what you're coming to. We worry about like, okay, are things converting, or what's, basically, am I getting traffic? Am I getting leads? But it's really about looking at the full picture of everything that you're getting, because if you're just looking at one thing, you're missing the main pieces. And so what I wanted to go through right now was just some ways that we can actually know now that we know what we want to measure, how do we actually get them? How do we integrate it? And also we'll look at what's the cost of not doing this? What's the cost of not measuring? Because if you go into things and you just say, well, all right, I have very limited metrics. I have very limited goals. I'm just going to push forward and just try to just put out as much content as possible and get as many eyeballs on things. You may end up spending a lot of time doing a lot of work that's very ineffective. And that's one of the worst things that can happen to you professionally, is to just waste time, waste energy, and not get results. So when we really look at this, accumulating, it all sounds good. Like we hear webinars like this, and we go to events and we hear everybody say, like, you need the data, you need the data, you need the data. And we all have the best of intentions when we come back to the office and we say, yeah, we need this data. But let's be honest, accumulating this data, it just takes a huge amount of time. It uses a lot of resources potentially. There are a lot of barriers in the way to get to all this information before you can even start moving forward. So that's a big problem. That's a huge issue that I've seen across the board. And no matter how big or small your company is, for larger companies, they may have an entire department that's devoted to this. For smaller companies, as we'll see, they might just say, hey, that's a lot of work, and I'm just going to do my thing and hope that it all works out. So what we end up having is a lot of organizations, they just take shortcuts. They don't know if they can actually get to this data, so they just take the shortcut. And because that process is complex and has lots of inputs and data points to pull together, they will just decide, hey, you know what? I don't have the resources to do it, and I'm just going to take the shortcut of using publication metrics, like Rebecca said. I'm just going to look at how many views something gets. I could even take a look. I could even see, well, how engaged was somebody on a piece of content. I could see how many conversions did I get, and then now you're getting closer. You're getting a little bit closer, but you're still not seeing the full picture. And for a lot of companies, the other shortcut that they take is they will actually look at everything. They will try to look at everything, and they will do it one time a year, usually at the beginning of the year, and they bring in as much stuff as they can, and sometimes they hire an outside consultant, and sometimes they try to do it internally, and they look at everything, and they say, okay, well, here's the data, here's where we're at, here's what I think we should be focusing on. They make an editorial calendar for the year, and that's kind of the end of measurement. And for them, granted, they've gone a lot farther than many people do. They've gone a lot farther, but they're still not able to make a transition or to adjust as things in the marketplace may change. And so what does this leave us? Well, it leaves us without the data that we need to be effective. So since we don't have the data, let's be honest, sometimes we kind of fake it. I don't know if this looks familiar, but I know I've overseen demand generation teams alongside with content marketing teams. And with demand generation teams, I was able to go to the demand generation team, and we had every metric available to us. We could say, if we put $10,000 into this SEM program or into this paid social program, we expect this return. And we knew. So we knew what the input was. We had a really good idea of what that output was going to be. And so from the demand generation side, it was kind of a well-oiled machine. This goes in, this comes out. All right, we have it down to a pretty good science. Now, it's not always perfect, but we had a really good idea. So we would have those meetings, and we have a really good idea of where we're going to be for the next week and for the next month, and everything was great. Then I go over to the content marketing team, and this is not to diss content marketing teams. It's just the fact that tools and everything have not been available yet to get content marketing teams to this level, I would go to the content marketing team and we'd say, well, what should we write? What should we do? And it's very similar to this boardroom right here. People just kind of threw out ideas. They'd say, well, a while back we wrote a post on this and it did fairly well, so why don't we do that? Okay, well let's try that. This might be kind of a new trend that's happening in the industry. Maybe we should write about that thing. And it just became more of an idea session. It was just everybody kind of pitched their idea, and usually it'd be the person who had the loudest opinion or the highest paid opinion would end up making the shot, saying, we're going to do this, this, and this, and that's what we're going to do, and we're basing it off of either the traffic that other blog posts got, and and we had written a white paper a long time ago on this thing, so we're hoping that it'll repeat that success. But we never really had real data behind it. And so what we ended up doing was, and when you might have this problem too, is when you look at your content marketing metrics and you go into Google Analytics, you look at it, and for us, the most popular blog posts we had were top 10 or top 50 lists. Here's top 10 things to do this. Here's top 50 people to follow on this. And those performed incredibly well. And so because we looked at that, we said, well, that's data. And that's going to help us identify what we should be doing. So we're going to use that. So what we did is we made a lot of posts around those things. And we thought, if our ideal customer reads that, then they'll convert. We're putting something out there. It's kind of related to our company, and hopefully that'll work really well. In the end, it didn't. We actually then started to analyze how well our content was really, really doing in terms of conversions and cost savings. And what we found is that we were spending a ton of time creating all these lists. We were spending a ton of time doing all this research, a lot of energy, a lot of money. And at the end of the day, they did not convert. And that's because we weren't measuring conversions. We weren't measuring efficiency. We weren't measuring any of those things. And what we were really doing is we were creating content for an ideal customer that we were saying, we hope that they would like this thing. And that was really the big problem. That's something that I really want to push here, is that the goal should be to create content that's for your real audience. Not some ideal one, not some ideal persona that you have built in marketing. You need to understand what your real audience actually wants. And not only what they want, but then what messaging appeals to them that's going to make them want to take a next step with you. And that's where this concept of content intelligence comes in. This idea of content intelligence is not exactly new. It actually has a few definitions. Ours is this. And it's really the science of identifying, and this is very important, predicting the content topics and themes that provide the most value to your audience. It is predicting value. What is going to give your audience the most value? At the end of the day, that answers the question of what should I write, but I really want to just emphasize this. The goal here is to provide value to your audience. And to understand what your audience values, you have to understand what they currently like, what currently resonates with them, and what actually gets them to take the next step to buy your service so that they can get value from your company even further. Now, this content intelligence is not just a one-metric thing like we were talking about before. This is a multi-metric scenario. So as Rebecca said, there are many different pieces that are coming together and many different things that we need to see. So we're not going to base our success through content intelligence just off of what topics drive the most traffic to your site, or even which ones convert the best. But we're going to look at as many metrics as we can and pull them all together into one single process. And so that is our goal with content intelligence. Now, how do you do something like this? Like, it sounds pretty crazy. It is a crazy process, but to make it hopefully very understandable and simplify it, it's really the combination of looking at your content. So it's looking at your content, and it's saying, when I look at your content, I want to actually read through your content and I'm identifying the individual topics that are really appealing to people. What's really appealing to your audience? Because a single page, may have multiple topics on it that are appealing to people. And what we do is we break those into topics, because then we're not just looking at the page level, but we're combining, let's say you have, 10,000 pages on your website. Well, yeah, you have probably 10 pages that are most popular, but when you break them into topics, what you're actually going to see is that different topics drive different things. So certain topics across all of your pages may be driving consumption metrics. Other topics may be driving sharing metrics or lead metrics or even to the sales level. So what we want to do is we want to identify what are these topics that are actually driving each of these things, because a single topic that you write about or a single post you write about, and this is a common thing that I see in content marketing all the time, is that people think if I write this article, I'm going to get a ton of traffic and a ton of leads and tons of engagement. And the real world does not work that way. The real world works that certain topics drive people to your site. And once they're to your site, you need to understand how to take them to the next level, because they're going to read and they're going to bounce. And so what you need to know is, okay, what's going to keep them there? So after I get them there, what topics then keep them there, so I can make calls to action that then keep them on my site, engage them on my site, that then convert. So I need to understand that whole process. And just like Rebecca was talking about, content intelligence brings all of this together so that I can actually see what's driving awareness, what's driving conversions, and then I can also see other pieces like what's actually driving optimization within my own marketing team. What's actually the best use of my resources. And by understanding this full picture, and I think Rebecca and I both like this slide the best, we can see a complete picture of everything around us. So I love this one because I have personally been in this situation so many times where a piece of content does incredibly well. You are on cloud nine, your team celebrates, you're just feeling fantastic about it. But because you don't have the full picture, sometimes you don't realize that, hey, you know what, yeah, that piece of content did okay. It did really well for a certain metric. But at the end of the day, maybe it cost a ton of money to create that thing, cost a ton of money to promote it, and it got a ton of views, but it didn't convert. Or it really didn't actually engage people. It just got people it was just window dressing. People just looked at it and then left. And so what you need is this multi-metric content intelligence, and that's what's going to really give you the full picture. And when you look at all of this, and so you take this for your website, and then you expand it to your competition's website, that's where real magic happens, because you can take the same scenario where we're looking at your website, but we can also look at your competition's website. And what we can then identify is how your competition is positioned against your competition. You can see where you have gaps in your content. So there might be places where you write a ton about certain topics, but you are completely missing a very important topic in your industry that your competition actually hits out of the park consistently, and you're not even there. You can also see where opportunities exist for your content, where maybe you've written a little bit about something and, your metrics say, hey, this didn't perform really well because our metric was around traffic. But what we can identify is, well, it didn't garner a lot of traffic, but it converted at 16% to a sale or to a lead. So it's a really good piece of content. It's just not a good piece of content at getting people into it. So that's a huge piece. I think there's a quote from Albert Einstein where he says, everybody's a genius, but the real root of it is that just because a goldfish can't climb a tree doesn't make him dumb. It's like if you judge a goldfish by how he climbs a tree, and I totally butchered that. But anyway, Albert Einstein's smart, and I'm trying to sound smart. The other pieces that you have on here are you can engage audiences. You can look at what's happening by channel. You can also look at what content converts to buying actions, which is obviously something that we really want to see. We want to know what's converting to buying actions. And then at the end of the day, we want to see these two things. What topics matter to my audience? because I really want to know what matters to them. And when I know that, I can know what I actually need to focus on creating next. And this allows you to not just take a shotgun approach and create as many pieces of content as possible, but instead you are going to know what you should be creating right now and where you should put your limited resources to get the best result. And the concept behind content intelligence is that right now you could run something like this over the course of months. You could do it, it takes a process of months to get data together, and then you do it one time, and it's done. But what we're trying to do at Saralytics, and this is the only sales pitch that I'm actually going to put in here, is that Saralytics takes this process and it makes it nearly immediate that you get the results, and it's consistently delivered to you. So this way, you're not just getting information one time, creating a strategy, and then hoping that it works throughout the year. What you're actually doing is you are trying to identify as the year goes on what things are changing. How have my competitors changed their positioning? How has my own content been performing? And you will be able to see changes as they happen within your industry. So you will know, hey, that thing that we came up with in January, the market shifted. People aren't talking about widgets anymore. They're talking about something else. They're talking about this thing. This is where we now need to shift. So we're not going to be stuck in our January methodology that we created. We're going to be able to be agile. We're going to be able to move. And we're going to be able to understand what's happening in our environment. And we're going to be able to actually create really high-value content. And by creating that high-value content, what we're doing is we're going to be delivering real value to our competition. So that's really the goal of business. And this is something that I 100%, this is my personal bias right now. I believe, people say businesses exist to create money or to make money. I disavow that. The reason why businesses exist is to deliver a value to their customer. That's the reason why businesses exist. And as content marketers, we need to understand that that's really our role. Our role is to deliver the most value to our customer. And if we're not delivering that value to our customer, we are losing out on the customer. The customer is losing out because they are not going to be able to see what other value we can bring. And if we keep this high volume approach, you're not really delivering value. You're just hoping to get somebody's attention. And that's not really helping them. It may help them, possibly, but they're going to have to really work for it to understand what you actually do. But if you know what to create, and if you can really target to those audiences, and you know what content then is going to help get them down the line and provide that value, you're both going to come out ahead. So with that, we will jump to questions if we have questions. And it looks like people actually like the Kraken thing. All right, excellent. So here we go. So here's a question. So, and Rebecca, this one is for you. How large of a marketing organization do you need to do content marketing well?
That's one of those questions that you answer with what always sounds like a cop-out answer, but it really is the only possible answer, which is it depends. But that's why you need a content strategy. So the components of a content strategy are, first, why are we doing this content? What's the goal? What's the business goal? Number two, how are we going to measure it? And number three, how do we need to resource it to get it done? So it's not just a matter of head count, and certainly you're going to need a head or two, depending on the size of your organization and the scope of your ambitions and content. You're also going to need tools and technologies. What can you, how big should that be? It depends on your objectives and goals, and of course it depends on your budget. I referenced GE earlier. A small startup or a mom and pop is not going to have those kinds of advantages and resources. So really the only possible answer here can be it depends. But with a strategy, you can figure it out.
Exactly. So in terms of identifying the measurement goals, where do you see the majority of companies lining up right now? Are the majority of companies falling very short from content strategy, or are they starting to pick up? Like, where do you see it right now? Like, what's the split when you look at companies out there? How many you say are actually, they understand it?
Yeah, the number of companies that say that they have a documented strategy has remained pretty unchanged over the last couple of years, while the number of companies that say they are engaged in content marketing continues to increase. So what we have is an explosion of tactics over strategy, very much like when social media came around and everybody was running around saying, we need a Facebook page, but they weren't saying, why are we going to need a Facebook page, or what are we going to try to achieve with it, or who's going to do it, or what are we going to put on it next week, next month, and next year. So content is very much in that, committing the marketing and committing the tactics without actually sitting down to figure out the whys, hows, and wherefores.
Right, and that's really what's contributing to, as Mark Schaefer put it, content shock, where the idea was, I need content. I'm just going to produce as much content as I possibly can. And that's where and as you saw at the very beginning, there was that issue of, here's what we need. We need measurement. Where are we going to invest? We're going to invest in just creating more content. And now we're overburdened. We have too much content. We have more content supply than we do have demand for it. And so now that we're there, the only thing that's going to stand, there are two ways to stand up. And Rebecca, I'd love to talk to you about this. I think that there are two ways that you can make content stand out. Either make it incredibly high quality and make it something incredibly valuable, or just create enough good content, just good enough, but create tons of it and just promote the hell out of it to get somebody's attention.
Very often you are going to have to promote content, possibly with paid media initially to call attention to it and to let the world know that it's there, and so that they beat a path to your door. But they're not going to beat a path to your door until customers are aware of it.
Excellent. And we have time for just one more question. And I'm going to throw this one your way. This is from Christina, and she says, so there's a big challenge with B2B professional services, is that there are multiple expertise industry verticals. How do you create a content strategy when there are numerous areas to focus on?
You prioritize. There are almost always, you're lucky if there are numerous areas to focus on. And I believe in what I like to call, in a topic I've researched, a culture of content. It's not just marketing that's got all the content. It's almost every public-facing aspect of your organization. So it might be sales that has stories, or customer service, or research and development. So part of the job of a good content marketer is to pinpoint the sources of those stories and those pain points and that internal expertise and really leverage it. But, of course, prioritize it and develop a taxonomy so that the right stories are happening in the right channels for the right audiences. Again, this gets back to, what is your content strategy?
Exactly. Prioritization. Well, excellent. Well, thank you so much. Well, I'm going to wrap things up. So I just wanted to thank everybody for joining this webinar today. And Rebecca, thank you so much for all of your insights on this. As always, it was fantastic. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And if you have any more questions, please reach out to Rebecca and myself. We are on Twitter. And here is the slide for our handles. So I am at Andersenology, and Rebecca is at LeapLink. All right. That being said, thank you, everyone, for sharing the day with us, and we will hopefully talk to you soon.
I'm going to echo those thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you again for your participation. That does conclude today's webinar. You may now disconnect your browsers at any time, and have a great day.